So let's talk a little bit about kind of getting to middle road. One of the questions I like asking every guest is, what was your first action?
Yeah, that's a good one. First action literally was designing a logo. That was it. That was kind of my first action. I had a fat can, I had like a fat soda can, and eventually the can is now skinny. But I had a fat soda can. I was on my Canva and just said, "Well, let's design a can." And I didn't know how to do that because I knew how to design, but I didn't know how to design a fat can like a Middle Road Energy logo. And I knew it was going to be Middle Road Energy. I mean, I could have done something with my name, but um, I can't. Actually, I know the trademark laws, and you can't do something like Midas Touch or Golden Touch because it's very high standards. So I wanted to do something a little bit more simple, and I wanted to do something like I said, back to the middle. And I said Middle Road Energy. So the first step literally was design the can, and then after that was come up with the formula.
Mm-hmm.
I had zero experience. So I had zero experience in nutrition labeling, but all I remember is as just as a person, right, just using common sense. You don't have to be an expert in everything. I don't have no masters or PhD in food science, but the one thing I do have a PhD in is understand what tastes good and doesn't taste good. So I said, well, it's something I can't read on a label. And of all the drinks I've had in my life, that doesn't have to be energy drinks. In fact, I think I only had one energy drink before creating this one in my life. Uh, I said, I can't read half the ingredients nowadays because half these ingredients are sourced, and it's like, what is pink salt? I don't get it. So I wanted to create something really simple so the customer, when they read it, he or she reads it, can read it, and they don't have to question what is that. Now, if they do question it, then I'll answer it. But most of the time, I just want to do something simple, and then after that was just caffeine content was real simple. I'm like 30 on the spot. Let's do 30, 35 tops because I knew just naturally the formula algorithm of a good drink would automatically be 100 milligrams caffeine, and here's why: because when you have 30 milligrams caffeine, you're thinking there's no way. Where's the energy? Well, when your brain think about it, when your brain naturally likes something or it's doing something, it's natural dopamine, and believe it or not, you're releasing natural energy through the good dopamine. That might be automatically you might get 50 plus of energy right there just through good energy because you're having a good time, good experience. You're feeling that clean energy through energy, like just chakras, I guess you could say. And when you add 30 milligrams caffeine, it's like having 80 milligrams, like a Red Bull of caffeine, but cleaner for you, and you're getting a good experience because you like something that tastes clean with no aftertaste, no 230, no heart exploding feeling, none of that crash and burn. That was the formula process I went through, and I said, "Well, I want this perfect." And now after that, it was just make sure we put a little bit of orange, black, and white cherry, and blueberry juice in there, which would cut back on the sweetness to be health conscious. Right, you don't want to put too much sugar.
Mm-hmm.
After that, really was just about adding your micro dosage of B12, zinc for immune support, and a little vitamin C, and that's it. That was kind of my first actions, right? Just the bare grits of it to make a logo, put on a can, redesign the can with designers, and then make that formula, right? And that's it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
did patent that, make that IP, and once I got that formula good, and I felt like it was sufficient in a plastic bottle. Now remember, I'm in a can. Plastic bottle tastes completely different than a can, but if I felt it was good in it was pretty good in a plastic bottle. I'm like, it'll be great in a can because the can holds more value and you can freeze it right when you get it in the fridge versus plastic that kind of just has that plastic taste.
Mm-hmm.
This has a more clean, flowing finish, and that's really what I did to start off with. And after doing some testing, we just went through approval in 2 rounds. It only took me 2 rounds to get the formula, and I knew it because I didn't add anything that was going to be crazy. I didn't add B9 or vitamin B2 or ribon. None of that. I don't have any of those I isms. None of that. Most of the ingredients have become from around the world. Basically, have been world renowned in terms of just simple things that have been on here on Earth forever, right? With a little bit of modern flair with the design. It's simple, just a road. It looks like a tongue in some cases. It looks 3D. Went with the matte finish, make the middle row energy pop a little bit, but that's it. That's all I did, and that's really was my first bear grits of it to say, what do customers like? I think customers really will like a clean finished formula with no aftertaste, and none of these ingredients you just can't read, or none of these added preservatives or added flavors that just make no sense. And once I got that down, at that point, it's just on me, right, to just start a business. That's just simple stuff. But the
Yeah,
Bear Grylls, to answer the question without getting too long winded, designed the can, formulated the product, made it simple, and then we're off for sure.
got it. So my follow up is, okay, you've never worked in kind of this food science space.
Mhm.
Who'd you call to work on the formula? Or
Oh,
was
yeah,
this just you in your kitchen putting stuff together and then calling? Like, how did you actually do that part? I'm curious because even if I ever thought about creating a food product, I know I would not know what on earth to do.
yeah. No, I can't do all that crazy stuff. I did not do anything in the kitchen. I had a professional formulation team called Power Brands, but I will say though I did my research just a little bit. I didn't put you think I put a lot of research into the formula. I really didn't put a lot into it though.
Mm,
I let them do the work. I really just thought about everything just like I said, storing. Every time you taste something, you store feedback. Your brain remembers that. You start getting sense and feelings. And because my palate, I guess you could say, is very I don't like a I don't like something strong. So example would be like a hard soda, or
mm,
like not so much alcohol, but like a hard, I don't drink, but a hard soda, like say really sugary. You just feel like you're sluggish. So I wanted to say, okay, that's storage. I don't need to do that.
mm,
Also, if it's too light though, it's like, mm, so I wanted to do something in the middle. And
yeah.
I gave I gave my formulation team, this is it. And they pretty much said that this is pretty on par with basically being a clean, functional beverage. It's
Yeah.
an energy drink, but it's also functional, which means you could, if you wanted to, you can put it in. I had a buddy that put in some juice. It's a good juice mixer, or if you wanted to go crazy, a good party mixer, which is nice. But it has versatility. It has the flair in terms of an energy drink, because, like I said, you'd be surprised with 30 milligrams caffeine plus the already good experience with natural energy with the pick me up. uh, you'd be surprised that could last you. We had a customer had he tried one out for his 9 to 5, and it lasted to him till about 5 o'clock,
Mm,
and in fact even longer, because you'd be surprised just because you're working through natural environment, right? Your environment dictates around you what your energy levels are, but because he was working, he had a little pick me up, and he had a good experience tasting it. That could
mm,
last you 8 9 hours. It could power you through the day. And if he doesn't have, let's say he doesn't have the best environment, it still can last you a solid 6 hours, because the experience of the drink, because there's no aftertaste really, there's no crazy carbonation that's going to make you gassy or burpy or bloated. It just keeps you going. I mean, you'll find that it's actual value into what, not just what I'm saying, but to actually what the product is saying.
mm,
And when the product really does offer clean benefits like that, and it's not, it's always going to spark to the point where it's like, I don't know, I just don't feel it, or I'm not feeling it. Well, this is it. It's that light, refreshing, but not too light pick me up. It's all subtle, but it's a magic when you have the subtleness. You're not getting that crazy sugar load. And I think that's kind of what we did in formulation. We didn't want to have sugar to the point where it's too crashy, like the sugary gets too sugary and gets like that sugary taste in your mouth. And we also didn't want it to be too light. So once we got that though, I was kind of confident saying, okay, well it'll take care of itself. You
yeah.
just have to read the label ingredients. Obviously, the other thing that's unique about this is there's no limit. Really, if you're 10 years old, you can probably have this because there's less caffeine than a cola and coffee. So if kids are having coffee and soda at 10, they can have this 100%. In fact, at the expo, we had kids that are 5 years old that had no problem drinking this. They already have full energy. So if you give them this, sure, it'll boost them, but it's not going to make you go off the rocker. So it's great. It'll still keep you balanced and fresh at any age. Really, there's no limit, which is nice. There's a lot of drinks now is 18 plus or 21 plus, or it has too much daily. I think it's 400 milligrams. Caffeine is the amount
Yeah.
for a daily person can take in caffeine. There's none of that. And there's a little green tea caffeine, which is nice. It's very subtle though. Everything is micro dosed to where you don't have to feel like you're extreme. It's all micro dosage, and you think about all little micro dosage of every little ingredient that you put in, it's going to add up to, believe it or not, the middle. Because if you
Yeah.
put just too much in, it'll crack the barrier of what's high, what's low, what's in the middle. So a little microdose of everything will get you that medium level, everything across the board. And that's what you want. You don't want something that's just going to be too low and it's just like a hit, or it's just like a quick hit and you just like, what happened? And you don't want something too high where it just hits you and it punches you out for a couple hours after getting an hour of burst. So that's what
Right.
we did. That's how we formulated it. That's how we started it. And we did not use no kitchen. we kind of had a good base for sure, as
Yeah.
they say.
No, that's awesome, man. And I'm curious, based off of one of the things you said, that you didn't do too much research, right?
Yep.
And I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, even kind of someone like me, you can quickly teeter that line of paralysis by analysis, right?
Mm.
And so I'm curious about how you approach. Hey, I need to go with my intuition on this versus I need to do some heavy research, talk to a lot of people, spend some time on this before I feel informed enough to kind of move forward. How do you approach that decision making framework or process?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. That's a great question. Everyone has that. Of course, there's going to be times where we're all going to struggle with that, but at the same time, it's like the more you analyze things, the more you'll start contradicting your own opinions. And you're your worst enemy sometimes. So I knew from a young age, just go into it, right? Even if it, well, I shouldn't say young, but even at my age, I'm like, you know what, just go into it. What's the worst that's going to happen? Someone's not going to like it, and just me going into it, I would say 98% approval rating so far on this. At the minimum, at least at the expo, I would say overall it's been about a solid 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10, like the 1 out of 10, maybe just don't like an ingredient or something, but that's fine. You realize that if you still had 9 out of 10, that's all you need. You don't have to get 10 out of 10 at a time, but that's the analysis part, right? If you start analyzing numbers and you start analyzing statistics, you forget that life was built on intuition,
Mm,
right? Think about the sailors and the Neanderthals and all those people way back in the world, right? Back in the before Christ era, the BC. They
mm,
didn't have the technology. They didn't have the formula process. They didn't have the luxuries we have now. What do they have to do?
mm,
They have to think about this. They had you can't see, but you think about the heart and their mind. They just connect those two things and they just go for it and run with it.
mm,
Obviously, you have to be calculated when you start growing a little bit bigger and you do X, Y, Z in the modern world. But back then, they just went for it and they
mm,
just used their bare hands and they just dived in. They had no computer to back them up. They had no X, Y. They just go in there. It's like diving into a pool for the first time, right? You're
yeah.
naturally going to feel in an uncomfortable environment, right? Especially if you're in the deep end, you seem like there's sharks all around you, and there's dolphins there too. Maybe they're just intimidating. Even though they're nice creatures, they might be intimidating because they can swim so fast. They got good echolocation. You're just a regular person, right? But guess what? You start swimming in that water, you'll naturally adapt. Whereas if you start guessing and second guessing yourself, you'll put yourself in a position where you're vulnerable, and you'll put yourself in a position where you're scared and can't fear
Hmm.
nothing. Right at the end of the day, if you start fearing things, that's really what analysis paralysis is. It's fear, right?
Yeah.
You're fearing that the analysis will take over. The odds are maybe not in your favor, and you just get back out. Now, there are certain things where you might have to back out. Let's say there's times where it's just like you have to really analyze this because it's a big thing, a big deal with people, and you have to put trust in people. I understand if you back out one of those, so you don't feel the vibes are there. That's absolutely fine. But in terms of like concrete foundations and just getting the brux of it done, just go
Mm,
in, dive in, see what's up. Even if the odds don't stand in your favor, like I said at the top, you can always find out that the 10%, the last 10%, you can always just fish your way into it because you showed up 90%. Whereas if you just show up 90% and you just figure, okay, I'll let the odds take over, or the analyzation of whatever XYZ material you're working on take over, it
mm,
gets become a headache, and that creates stress.
yeah.
One of the biggest things I think a lot of people in this space is that they're too stressed out, too worried about tomorrow. Uh, if it's not a good day, listen. If it's not there today, it still can be there tomorrow, right?
Mm.
And that's it. And if you take care of it within, I always say you don't have to. I used to say take care of it now, which is important. You still take care of it now, but now in the business world, you have to understand people too. Uh, I can't just go on my time all the time, right? People have
Yeah.
busy lives. I used to be like that all the time. It's got to be now, but now I give people a week. I give people 1 week, give them 7 days to just settle it out, let it marinate, right? Get the old formula of cooking a good piece of steak, right? Let it marinate, season in the fridge, and then it's like, okay, I think we're good. I gave them a good solid 5 6 days. Let's talk then. Gives you some time, air out any hash it out, little details. Let them analyze a little bit, but don't get anything more than a week because you start getting more than a week, then it's like, okay, well, what happened here? But give them a week. Don't rush into it. Don't feel like if you start rushing into it right away, they might think you're desperate. So you got to
Mm.
understand a little psychology as well. But if you don't rush it, you play it back, you play it cool, stay cool. Don't crack under the pressure, which is easier said than done, of course, sometimes. But if you don't crack and just stay grounded, you'd be surprised what can lay at the end of the. You can be surprised what lies ahead at the end of the tunnel. And sometimes at the end of the tunnel, you might get that handshake of saying, "Hey, we did it right."
Yeah.
Because you gave me the time. We did a perfect plan because you didn't just force it in there and started throwing darts, hoping it would land. Sometimes you just throw one dart. That's all you need. Or some
Mm.
people, it's the opposite, right? 65 darts are thrown, maybe one lands. But sometimes it's for one person. It's just one dart. It landed. Great. Now we just have to figure out how we can do that again because not everything's going to be like that. But when you do get that one time, it just gives that momentum spark that can create you to better heights and better opportunities for the road ahead. Whereas if you just don't feel like you're there and you just start to rush things and you sound desperate, it doesn't work. So you got to understand a little bit of psychology to play this game, I guess, and
Mm.
also understand how the world works too, because you're not the solar system. You're not the sun.
Yeah.
No one is the sun. No one is the solar system. We're all just little stars, and if we remind ourselves that we're just little stars in this universe, we just need to connect with those little stars, and we can all gather around the sun one day and really respect that the sun is still going to be the sun, even if it's raining, even if it's cloudy, even if the fog is there. The sun's out every day. It's just
Mm.
clouded by some rain or fog, and that's just like us, right? We're just little stars. Even at night, the moon's out, but we're just little stars looking and respecting that, and always having that as a mentor, right? The sun or the moon is a mentor. The little stars next to us, left and right of us, could be our friends or our potential clients, and you need to still respect that and respect the two different entities as the sun and a little client for sure.
Mm. So one of the things that popped in my mind as you were talking was the idea of fear
Mhm.
and risk taking, because that is the core of entrepreneurship. So I'm curious, what about entrepreneurship, if anything, are you afraid of?
Oh man, I don't really nothing really gets to me. Honestly, nothing really scares me at the end of the day.
I would
Because
have
at the
guessed
end of
that
the
based off what you said.
yeah, nothing really. The only obviously I have certain fears like just lightning or nonsense like that, but that's not really entrepreneurship. That's just weather things I can't control. Right, like Mother
Yeah.
Nature, you have to respect that. That's different. But like in terms of everything I can control, there's nothing to fear. I mean, of course, you're going to have days, of course, where it may not be there up to your standards, but you realize that that's just part of the process, and
Yeah.
there's nothing to fear. I mean, life. If life was if you lived a life every day in fear, then you wouldn't understand what life is to begin with. And that's just I think the problem with nowadays in society is you see what's on social, you see what's on XYZ, and your brain thinks, oh well, that's where I got to be, and it just starts creating fearful thoughts and desperation. And once that sets in, it can get really rough. The seas become rough. There are
Mm.
days where sometimes I'll just intentionally challenge myself. I'll just like, you know what? I'll step up the intensity just on maybe not so much business, but maybe just a different area. Maybe it's a workout. Maybe it's just going outside. Just little ripples in my mind. I'll just challenge my mind. Maybe it's playing a card game online, and I'll put it on the highest difficulty. Just doing something like that challenges me, but it doesn't fear me. And what it does is when you start doing those little challenges, you start to become immune to it.
Mm.
It's like the immune system, right? The immune system. It's kind of funny we're doing this with the immune system talk because
Mhm.
kind of love what's going on right now. But the point is like when you're young, you were taught keep your hands clean, all that. Of course, do that, but when you're young, you also don't realize you don't know what to fear. When you're a kid, you just go out there and do it. I never lost that. I guess you could say I never lost that 5 year old mentality. Just go out there and do it. Right,
Yeah.
roll around the dirt. Right, because what's the worst that's going to have you a little dirty? But that builds character and it builds immune system. And in this case, it builds your fear tolerance to be like, hey, there's nothing to fear. Now, there are things like I said, I do fear if it's a bad deal. Let's say a bad deal happens, like you get scammed or something. Everyone's going to get scammed once in a while. Excuse me. It may not so much be a bad scam, but you felt like you got scammed because it's maybe I scammed my energy that day. I just didn't feel it, or maybe someone actually just gave you a bad. You just learn and you go back on that horse and say, hey, let's get back up. It's just one
Mm.
thing. We'll make it. We'll get it back, right? We'll get
Yeah.
that back, and we'll continue to push because it's the only way to live. I just can't. I can't see myself saying, "Well, I got to fear this," and then the next thing you know, the moment you fear it, you just screwed yourself because the moment you fear it, it's like, "Oh no, my brain chemistry changes," right? Because your brain is an incredible thing. I don't have the full study, but
Yeah.
when you do certain habits a day, your brain understands and develops a routine. So let's say you're doing this XYZ, you have the same mindset XYZ, it's consistency. But if you change it, whether it be for the better or the worse, it changes. And sometimes, believe it or not, it's crazy, but you think you're doing something better. Maybe you're putting more hours in. In the beginning, it might work. The short term, you might get the results, but in the long term, it might degrade yourself. So even
Mm.
just because you think it's better, it's not. It may not be better. That's why uh, it's important to stay consistent, but don't be afraid of change, right? So if you think if it's yourself putting change in, that's fine. But if it's like let's say something changed in an ecosystem of what you're doing, you don't be afraid of it. But then that's where you say, okay, let's ask some questions, right? You start asking questions about just a couple, and once you get
Mhm.
one or two questions in, you feel like it's good, you keep it. After those one or two questions, you feel like that change isn't good, you just discard it. Just don't do it, right? Just it's simple. No, don't feel like that change is going to work. We'll discard it, but maybe someone else wants to try it. You pick up the phone and say, "Hey, how did that go?" Right?
Yeah.
If you're in a team situation, I went well. Okay, then teach me a little bit. Just learn. Just observe. Don't say much. Just observe. See how I do it. If it's good, put in your playbook. Simple as that. It's crazy to think, but there's a lot of great things I remember one time, the first time I was doing old commentary. I do commentary for my buddy. He does like some racing series.
Mm.
At first, I'm like, man, I love racing. I do. It's one of my passions, but I've never done commentary before. This is like 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm like, let me just see how I would fit. And I just learn. I pick up on it. I do it, and it's something different. And I love it because
Yeah.
I pick up on it. It's abstract, but the abstract things sometimes, those abstract concepts, those foreign concepts, where people will run from, you just go to it. You go towards the fire. In this case, going towards the fire and running through it is okay if you understand that it's okay for you. If it's okay for you, then you do it, and that's how you create no fear. But the one thing you do is, okay, I'm going towards it. I'm right there, but you never go through that fire. Then how will we ever know if there's a real positive or hypothetical outcome? It's a hypothetical outcome. There's no positive or no negative reinforcement. It's hypothetical until you go through it. So once you go through that fire, even if it burns you, you still
Right.
learn something no matter
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I really like the mindset of, you know, you win or you learn, right? That's really
Yep.
kind of what it's about. So I really do like that mindset. Um, my last question before we jump into some of the quick hitters would be: were there any surprises or misconceptions that you had as you started Middle Road Energy, and now you're kind of sitting back and you're reflecting and saying, that's interesting. Like, this is a new thing that I learned that if you had asked me months ago, I would have not expected this to be the reality.
I, I think the only thing I would say, this is a tough one. I guess the only thing I would say that's a little bit different than what I first had planned was how long it really takes to get. Really, it's two things: label review and just the things you can't control. This is a very patient game. I mean, it took me a long time. I mean, now 10 months, 11 months, a year, basically, to some people is nothing. For me, that's a long time.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how long it takes to do federal things. I can't control labor review. I can't control FDA. I can't control any of that. Right? All I can do is just put in the work, the application, and you have to let it sit.
If you found this video to be helpful, please like, subscribe, or leave a comment. If you're an entrepreneur and want to share your journey and be helpful to others, please hit us up on our social media channels, or you can shoot us an email at behelpfulpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks. Be helpful.